This meeting is being live streamed. Okay. Kyle, I don't know if I agree to being live streamed. I'm not sure I agree with this situation.
And we're live.
So there was a delay.
There's an 18-second delay from what we're saying now.
Quick, someone read off the lottery numbers. No, wait, that doesn't work. Did you post the YouTube video link? YouTube link video?
I guess it's my turn to add here.
Sure. If you want to annoy everybody, I mean, I already told them to come back in 45 minutes. You can just
Yeah, but everyone
assume they'll see it. Does Zoom play the chat?
I don't know. I've
I
never
have
done
no
this
idea
before.
like what happens.
This shouldn't be private. It's showing it's private for some reason.
Bum, 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 bum.
Okay. I can see the chat now.
Me too. Someone sent a heart. Hey, Kyle.
Hi, Mindy. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you? It's been a while since we did one of these things.
It has been so long.
What's up with that? It's like we've fallen off a schedule, or we never had a schedule, or I don't know. It's almost like we're
Plead the
volunteers.
Mindy, you look tired. Did you get any sleep last night?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember. It's been a while since last night. I don't remember if I got any sleep or not. But it's been you know, it's life is tiring. That's what happens.
I agree. I agree very much so. Do you remember what we're here to talk about?
We're here to talk about how much fun it was to do MSP GeekCon. Wait, no, that's not right.
That's next week's video.
That's next week's video. When we talk about the new MSP GeekCon coming eventually.
That's next month's video.
Next month's video. Yeah, we are here to talk about how to plan and implement a business critical application migration of some kind. And so, you know, we're all more or less MSPs. Some of us may not be MSPs, maybe vendors to MSPs, but we all have that one system or maybe two or three systems that we can't live or do business without. You know, the typical MSP would look at their PSA platform, where they do ticketing and where they do time tracking and billing. So that would be one of those pieces. Others would look at their email as one of those things, because you can't, like, today, most support is generally done over email or chat of some kind, some communication platform. And without that communication, you can't provide service, right? MSP business is a service-oriented business. So at the very least, whatever that communication platform is, that would be considered business critical. If you close your eyes and think, like, what would happen if X software was no longer around that I use every single day in my company? And the answer becomes, we would crawl to a stop, or basically stop. We would shut down. We would not be able to
migrate to Google Apps.
That answer would tell you whether or not this is a business critical application. And the thing is that the MSPs, and it's not just MSPs, like everything that we're talking about, everything that we're going to say applies to every business. They all have these kinds of applications. Unless you're like, one person company running everything out of an Excel spreadsheet, and then your business critical application becomes an Excel document, right? I'm sure as an MSP, you've had clients like that who've called in, be like, hey, this 35 megabyte Excel file is corrupt, and now I can't run my business. This one sheet out of the 1,000 tabs that I have, the formula is doing something wrong with 300 other tabs ago as we try to create a trend of our finances over time. Yeah, like I've had those calls before. And that spreadsheet
hurt so much.
That spreadsheet has become a business critical resource, right? So yeah, everyone has them. They come in different shapes and sizes. And another way to identify them is if you think about moving off of it, you get a headache. Or you like instinctively flinch away, like, no, I can't do that. You ever try getting a client off of an Excel spreadsheet like that and it doesn't go well? Nope, too much work. Sorry, can't do it. That brings us to a thing called tech debt, kind of, which is a very, very popular topic these days, and also semi-misunderstood topic.
Yeah, I think most people classify tech debt as something like a software vendor has old programming code, which is true, but also not the whole truth. Tech debt, as I phrase it, is technical debt that you've accumulated in applications and processes and procedures and systems and everything you do in a business sense, business debt, non-financially, basically.
Yeah, and it could relate to financial, for sure. But the key is like technical debt, like you said, the classic use of tech debt is generally talking about a developer or software vendor who's developing software, and they're basically building on an old code base. Like they have a product, that product is already making them money. It's already successful. They have companies using that product, but the product is running on an old code base. So anything that you do as a software vendor or as a developer, any time you spend on upgrading the code base that does not provide additional enhancements, bug fixes, feature requests, and so on, is tech debt. Because it's pointless time only there because of the tech debt that you have, right? And otherwise not needed. You're not making any new money off of it. And the only reason why you're doing it is because you need to stay current. That's it. And so that's where the traditional use of tech debt comes in. When they say, oh, this software has a lot of tech debt, it means that it's running on an extremely old code base of some kind. And to fix it may not be worth it because the amount of effort that it would take to invest to recode that base is not worth the amount of money that you get in return from that effort. And so that's why, like, oh, there's a lot of tech debt, we can't do that. Let's just start a whole new product. Like that doesn't fix it. Like, you still have the tech debt. You still have a product that's already making you money. Building a brand new product from scratch is not going to erase that tech debt. Now, it may be less work to rebuild from scratch than it would be to fix existing. That could happen, but that's part of the determination that you make when you're going through that kind of calculation. Mm-hmm. But outside of the classic definition of tech debt, like what it really talks about, if you expand beyond that, is any system, any company or any person investing time into something that has a finite end. And so if, for example, you're using a software, now you're not developing the software, their business is using a line of business application or critical business application that is end of life. Okay? Any time that you spend fixing, developing, adjusting your business processes into that application is tech debt. Because it is going to end. You see the end. It is end of life already. Support's ending end of the year or something like that is happening. There's a date on it. And you know that any time you invest into that software is going to be useless in 2 years, in 3 years. And so that is tech debt right there that applies to not just developers and software companies, but also to the standard business. And so the point of that was I don't remember why we started talking
You
about
have to
tech debt.
identify your tech debt
We
to
have to identify the tech
understand
debt.
to understand why you want to migrate your business critical applications.
Yes, we were talking about migrations. That's where we came in. Um, the point, like that feeling that you get, like, oh, I don't want to do that. It's too much work, right? That's when you start realizing, hey, maybe you have too much tech debt here, right? There may be something that you should have been thinking about this earlier. And now pushing that off the road, like down the road, doesn't make that easier. It's not like, oh, that's tomorrow's problem. That's next week's problem. That is not going to work, because what's going to happen at some point is the software will stop working. The process that you have in place, that Excel spreadsheet, will stop working. And for migration purposes, you will want to have a scheduled downtime where you know and can expect and account for that interruption than an unexpected interruption because something went wrong and now you have to fix it and now you're forced to be down. So that's the first real big rule when it comes to migrating critical business applications. Don't wait until it's too late, number one.
Yeah, waiting doesn't change anything.
Waiting makes it worse.
Yep.
Right? Having an unexpected downtime, it doesn't matter how critical it is to your business or how much you have to shut down operations or how much money you're going to lose for being down for a day. All that is better to do it planned than it is to do it unplanned. Because you have, I actually, on my Mendy Online blog, I actually wrote an article about partnerships and relationships with clients and vendors and stuff like that. The core that it comes down to is setting expectations. Like, you can have the worst product in the world and the best service. And if you're providing some kind of value, even a little bit, and the service you're delivering is top notch, the clients will stay with you. The setting expectations is what sets a good customer service experience. And so being able to say, hey, dear customer, I got to be honest with you, I've been running my entire accounting firm on an Excel spreadsheet. We now have about 30 spreadsheets over the last 25 years, about 300 megabytes worth of raw text that we have to bring into an accounting package. And I have to get this done by this time. I don't have time to do anything else. So I'm going to be shutting down for 2 days and focusing on just that. If you have an emergency, call me. Otherwise, please understand that it's going to take 2 days for me to get back to any requests that you have. Setting that expectation.
Don't do that tomorrow,
100%.
Though. Make sure that's a planned date expectation and remind them going
give them
forward.
Time. Yeah, give them time. Don't be like last minute, right? Give them time, because if it's last minute, then there's no difference between an unplanned interruption and a planned interruption.
Yep.
The whole point about planned is to make them aware, let them know it's coming, and give them time to get used to that idea. And so doing that planned is going to be much better than them calling you and you going, oh, sorry, I can't talk. I'm busy redoing all my accounting right now because everything fell apart. Bye. Like, you know, when you're in rush and you're under stress and number one, you don't necessarily speak eloquently and professionally to the client at that time, depending on how well you handle the pressure. So having that planned is going to be much better. Number one, have a plan for when it's going to happen.
So let's talk about, let's say we've made the determination as a business that this application that we are using, Microsoft Excel, is tech debt, and we want to move to a real accounting package. So we have started like mentally understanding, like we've made the mental decision that this is going to happen, which is one of the biggest hurdles you can do. But we can classify this as like phase one, right? Pre-migration planning, because there's a lot that goes into understanding the limits of where you're at and where you want to go. And you also have to pick a vendor that matches with where you want to go and will deliver what you expect them to deliver, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about gathering the requirements you have. So what are some things that you would recommend we put together to determine this isn't working, why this isn't working, that we can utilize when we talk to other vendors?
One of my favorite topics to talk about and I say that a lot, so it's probably not really a favorite, but I say it anyways because I say it often, and so it's becoming my favorite. Is the fact that MSPs and businesses are the same exact thing. They're like any customer of an MSP runs a business just like an MSP runs a business. The only difference between the business of an MSP and the business of anyone else is that the MSP is like they're in like a time dilation field where everything happens much faster. They're in the middle of everything. They're the hub, and they're holding it together, and they have to do everything that they're doing X times faster than an individual business because they're doing it not just for one business, they're doing it for 10 or 15 or 20 or however many clients they have. And so the MSP always has to be ahead of the game in terms of business processes, in terms of communication, in terms of being able to handle their vendors, in terms of turning billing around. Like they have to be ahead of their customers because their customers are relying on them to do it, right? So because of that, MSPs tend to learn lessons a lot faster, right? The easiest way to see this is in the technical area. If you take any help desk technician from an MSP company and stick them into enterprise IT, level to level, the technician coming out of the MSP will be more skilled than a technician from enterprise because
bored
because the high level stress that they're under, like it's a constant, war breeds fighters. That's basically what it is. And essentially at an MSP, you're at war, with technology.
Printers.
Printers, scanners, yeah. Whereas an enterprise IT, you're like, in the countryside guard of town that doesn't really see much action. And so you're not as sharp. The point of that is to bring it back to your question. How do we, what was your question specifically?
Gather
again?
requirements.
Gather requirements, right? So the things that you need in order for your business to run, like you guys, like you should know. You already know the critical function and critical areas of a software that is needed for whatever it is that it's replacing. So we want to come through. I actually don't remember how I was going to bring back what I was saying to this point, but there was a point to it eventually. If it comes
you
back
might
to
remember
me, I'll talk about it again. I might remember it. But we have to deal with this all the time for customers. Customers come to us, say, hey, we want to do migration, right? And so like we have this basic plan of a migration. Okay, what are we replacing? What is it that needs to happen? And we walk them through that process. There's vendor selection that has to go on that we may or may not be involved in as the MSP, but we'll identify really quickly if that vendor is decent to work with or has a problem, right? How many times, like I'll tell you for myself personally, it's happened many times where customer comes to me and says, hey, we're replacing this software with something. Can you work with the vendor to get it done? And I talk to them, hey, what is it that you need done? Oh, we need to run this application on the server. It needs to always be logged in. You got to open it up manually. And if it ever reboots, you got to log in again and start it, dental software.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Dental software, like almost every dental software server system will require something like that. And you instantly know, like, this is not going to work out well, right? And so we have this understanding of things because of the work that we've done with our clients. We just have to apply it to ourselves internally. And it's the same thing reverse. The lessons that we've learned, we want to apply back to the clients. So when we're looking at another software, like we know something's going to go wrong, we need to address it. So the first thing is, just like anything else, accept that there's a problem, right? In order for you to work on a problem, you have to accept the problem first exists. The problem is that the software we're using does not work. We need to replace it. What is the plan to replace it? We don't know yet because this is early stages, but let's agree to set a plan by the end of the year. Okay, so now if it fails before the end of the year, you're expecting it. Okay, we knew it was going to happen. It happened before we were ready. No problem. Let's deal with it then.
We have a plan that we're building out. It may not be completely done, but at least we have a starting point.
If it doesn't fail, then you're in the better spot, right? Because now by the end of the year, you'll have that plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is that plan? That plan is, number one, find a vendor you want to work with. Okay, I'm moving that to the top of the list.
I would back up a little bit, personally. I I think it might be more prudent to document what your current system has, their functionalities, workflows, dependencies, so that everyone is on the same page of what is needed for this system to function and function in the next system as well.
Yeah, I would rephrase what I said. Instead of finding a vendor that you want to work with, I would rephrase that to say, find out what kind of vendor you want to work with. Identify the values that you hold that you would be willing to accept as a partner that you want to work with. That's number 1 or 2. Like, some of these orders can be interchanged, but that is going to be one of those first things that you want to do, because otherwise you're going to get in bed with a vendor and it's going to be too late before you realize you don't want them.
Yep.
And then part of that process, like you said, is identifying like, what is the function the software is actually doing. In this case, the Excel spreadsheet is doing my accounting for me. It's my database. No problem. Understand what is it that you're doing inside that spreadsheet that makes it valuable to you. Why can't you just use a notepad and pen? Right? Yep. So you figure out those functions, those key things, and you have to start classifying them as must-haves or nice-to-haves or bonus, but not really, I don't really care about it.
Yeah.
Being able to make a row in Excel bold may not be something you care about in your accounting package, but it's a feature that exists, right?
I would also, after you get done highlighting the things that it does now, that are, and start, classifying those, you can also identify gaps and improvements required in the new software. Like going back, with the Excel scenario, I need it to do math for me that I don't have to manually build a calculation for, right?
Right.
I need to be able to run reports and get P&L statements, because Excel can't do that unless I build out a P&L statement generator inside Excel, which is probably possible considering the things I've seen on the internet with Excel.
So this brings me back to actually remembering what my point was with the point about the MSPs being a war zone. The bottom line is that the amount of time that you spend running your business is time taken away from you serving your clients. And so if you're doing something, just because it works for you right now, it doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. And this is something that you see both with your clients and internally. So while you're looking for software to replace what you have, you don't have to stick feature to feature, right? You want to find out, like Kyle, like you said, gaps in your current processes that the new software can account for. Even if you don't know what that software is, be like, you know what? I'm spending 30 minutes a day figuring out calculations on this spreadsheet. It would be nice if I can get that number down. Like, here's what I'm doing in these cells. Like, I'm doing this kind of formula. I'm spending 30 minutes a day on this. Get it down. I'm spending another 3 hours at the end of the month, and I would love to get rid of that too, doing manual reconciliation. I'm spending another, 6 hours at the end of the year or quarterly, depending on whatever it is you're doing with your finances. But those things the things that are related to the spreadsheet or to the application that you're using, and the manual steps that you have today, the processes you have today, are all up for revisiting because you're changing the software. And you should not be scared of changing that just because, well, it's worked up until now, right? We always want to strive for higher efficiency.
I mean, let's think about technology 3 years ago today, right? It has changed drastically just in those 3 years. And, do go 3 years farther back and it gets even more of a distance. And your business operates the same way. It's just not efficient anymore because you're using, my Celeron 3200 still works, but I'm not running my entire business. I hope I hope you're not running an entire business on my Athlon X2 from 1998. Still kicking around. But you should be, in my opinion, you should be looking at your entire business, processes, procedures, applications, systems every 3 to 5 years.
And so right now, for example, in the spreadsheet scenario that we're talking about, the challenge is that a spreadsheet is not a scalable system. for accounting. And so eventually you're going to run into a situation where that data is not consistent, right? That's the real reason why you're changing. It's worked up until now, but I just can't keep that. It's not sustainable. The answer is not to go find an Access developer to build out a database in Access for you to just transplant your spreadsheet into an Access program. Because then you haven't gained anything. You've just
Added
removed
more
one
complication.
challenge.
You've
You've now
removed
solved your scalability for what, another couple hundred megabytes till you hit the 2 gig or 4 gig limit or whatever it is. But you haven't actually solved any real business problems, right? Everything is up for question at this point. When you know now is the time to do it. If you're taking the time to do this crazy migration, now is the time to get really invested in it and making sure you do it properly, which means investing money in a real platform or product and making sure that you've identified, okay, now, oftentimes people start up businesses, they have no idea what they're getting into, right? I have no idea what I was getting into when I started Rising Tide. I had no idea what I was getting into when I started in telecom at the MSP. And what happens is that we learn through the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that we've gone through this phase of running the business for X number of years, and now we know what challenges to expect because of day-to-day operations, we've become familiar with them. And now we can figure out what we need to do to account for those challenges or make them easier. So yeah, definitely want to revisit. Go ahead.
To tie all that up, as far as building out your requirements for your new software package, the final thing you should do in that group of things is define your success criteria. Define what is success for you and your company, and build out the team who's involved in this should be from every aspect of the business that the application touches. If it's just an Excel spreadsheet and it's only the accountant, then that may not affect the CEO because you just give him the same data in a P&L report every week. He doesn't care. He just wants the same data. But
he might care if he sees the number of hours invested in making that report go down, and suddenly he starts saving money where you can spend time in other places.
Exactly.
But yeah, he shouldn't care about the specific method or mechanism about how you get there, as long as you get there.
But if it's a business full of accountants and everyone uses an Excel spreadsheet, including your own accountant, then that's going to have, your operations guy is going to need to know what systems to utilize. Your CEO is going to want to know, like there's so many processes and people that you need to include into that. Right. But those are the things you need to do before you pick an application to go to.
Yeah. And alongside with that roundup, like you were talking about like what success looks like after the migration, right? Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about just features. We're talking about timeline. We're talking about downtime. We're talking about training time. And at what point are you looking to have everybody up and running where you now are no longer thinking about the migration? Like the business has now come back to the point where it was, if not moving at a more efficient pace. And that's the point of where success really gets measured by. Mm-hmm. The other thing that you want to look at is you're likely, depending on the software, assuming we're not talking about a spreadsheet to an accounting package, but depending on the software, you may not get feature to feature parity, right? So you may have like need have features, a feature like the software that you're using has a specific function that works a certain way that you absolutely rely on as a business. But that doesn't mean the new software that you're looking at or the new software that you want to go to is going to have that functionality. And it also doesn't mean that that's a showstopper, mm-hmm. right? And this is what you want to start identifying is what are showstoppers to this process? Because you want to find and identify those immediately prior to you doing too much work in the actual migration itself. And just because a feature that you have marked down as need to have doesn't exist, doesn't mean it's a showstopper. What that means is there a reason why you need this feature, right? I like technical troubleshooting is my favorite thing to talk about. I just said it again. And the first thing I always talk about technical troubleshooting is you ask the question why, right? What is the reason behind whatever issue is being reported? Why does the user think it's not working? Why is this problem? Why do you think this problem actually exists? What have you verified? Getting to the root why of what's going on will tell you really what's happening. And so the why of why you need that feature will tell you whether or not it's actually really necessary, or is there a different feature in the new software that'll allow you to rebuild the reason why you need this feature so that you don't need it anymore, right? Can you replace A with B by adjusting your business process? And oftentimes you'll find that adjusting the business process to use that new feature will actually make it more efficient. Oh, now that we've changed these 10 things, we aren't spending 45 minutes making sure that those 10 things were done correctly. The system's doing it automatically using this other new feature that's completely unrelated. And we're just completely forgetting about the ability to link two things together because we don't need it anymore.
Yep. That's exactly what I was going to say, was just because it does A, software doesn't do A, but you can do C and D tangentially and accomplish A, right? So you have to keep in mind, you want the outcome, not the exact process when you write down your requirements.
Right. Or even accomplish the reason why you needed to have A, right? So there's layers behind it, and you don't want to get stuck on the first layer.
Right.
So this is all the identifying stage, right?
We haven't got to we haven't even decided on we've decided. So let's roll it back. We've identified that we have to move. Excel is no longer doing what we needed to do. We've built our requirements, we've identified gaps, and we've identified our current functionality requirements, and we've defined our success criteria. Now I think we need to talk about vendor selection. So you touched on this a bit with identify characteristics of a vendor you want to work with.
Yeah.
How would you go about how would you go out creating something like that, or identifying those individual aspects?
One of the things we did often back in the day when I was doing this was I would just ask the vendor that I'm talking to, hey, like, how do you compare with the other products? Like, maybe you found one competitor of theirs, you didn't find others, but you can ask them like vague leading questions, and they'll just start rattling off competitors of theirs.
Salespeople.
Like, oh yeah, well, like, we're better than this company because of blah blah blah, and like, cool.
We're better than Lotus Notes and Google Docs, and
and you just start writing down names of those vendors to compare to. Now, at this point, we're not looking at the vendor to see how they behave. We are judging them, which I hate doing because I don't like judging people. So the thing I always say, I don't judge people, but we are judging the company. And so every interaction that we have, and I, again, in my blog article, I talked about this, setting expectations is how we do customer service, right? Every interaction that you have with a client, every interaction you have with a vendor is an opportunity for both that client and for that vendor to have expectations set. And it's an opportunity for the vendor to set expectations to you, and you to set expectations to the client, and so on and so forth. It's one big chain. Now, if they start missing expectations from the beginning, or if those don't start lining up, then you should be measuring each interaction that you have with the vendor as you start talking to them from the beginning, because that plays into whether or not they align with the core values that you're going to want to have them aligned to. Now, you're not really judging them to say whether or not they're good yet, because you don't even know if they have a viable product. And so the first thing you have to do is identify whether the products that they're offering actually works for what you want. And what
you have your information compared against.
Exactly. And so you start looking at the product and saying, can you accomplish these things? Now, while you're looking product to product, you're also running a side analysis of vendor to your core values to say, did they get back to me in time? Are they delivering on their promises, right? If when a vendor gets back and says, hey, no problem, we can do blah, I don't know this answer, but I'll get it back to you by the end of the day. Have they missed that deadline? Or did they meet it? And if they missed that deadline, that's not a good sign, right? If they are not delivering on the promises they're already giving you in the sales process, I guarantee you they're not delivering on the promises after the sales process, because most companies have streamlined their sales process to be the most critical, most important, because that's where they want. What's the stupid saying? First impressions are what something about first impressions, right? Like that's your one chance. That's your first impression is most important. Time to make that to give that impression to you about
30,
how
I mean,
you're going to be.
I only know about the 30 seconds to make a good first impression.
Okay,
after that,
30
it's
seconds
ruined.
to make it. Yeah, so it's the same idea though, right? And the thing is like sales is their first impression with you. And if they're not delivering a good impression on that first meeting, on that sales interaction, then it's just going to get worse from there. And this is common sense. I'm not saying anything you guys don't already know, but I'm saying it anyways because it underlines the fact that you should be judging them in every interaction that you have with them. And vendor analysis, like we talked about vendor selection on a previous webinar, like one many months ago, but it's something that you're always ongoing. Every time you talk to their support, every time you talk to the vendor, it's always an ongoing analysis. Like, how has the vendor upkept their goals or standards that you've picked them for, right? So you're doing the product analysis. You're going to say, I want to go with this product, or I don't want to go with this product. But at the same time, you're also judging the vendor.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's say that sales, you go through, you're involved with sales, you have a demo of the product, you have a trial, you're in it, you're playing around with it, you're trying to match up the things. Sales is doing okay. Do you do anything else? Would you recommend we do anything else to go through and evaluate the vendor, considering the other aspects of vendors that we technically haven't touched yet?
Yeah, I mean, we just said that your first impression is your salespeople, and so they always make the best effort for the sales to be the most communicative and the most, the best experience you'll ever have with the vendor. But what about the rest of their company? And so the question is, how critical is this software to your business, right? And the answer in this case is going to be vary, because that is your business critical. That's literally what this call is about, right? Business critical software. So it's very critical to your business. And then my next question to you is going to be, what is the SLA or the service agreement, or maybe it's not contractual, maybe it's like a expectation that you're setting with your client in terms of how fast or how quickly you're going to be turning stuff around. Because the vendor that you're working with needs to meet or exceed that expectation, because you cannot possibly deliver on service faster than what the vendor in your supply chain is giving you. It's just not possible. If you go down because they go down and they have a turnaround time of 48 hours, and your response time is an hour or two, unless you've set that expectation with the customer to say, hey, unless we have a critical outage, which we'll let you know, blah, 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 right? Unless you've set that expectation, there's no way for you to meet the expectations that you've set. Which means that in order, you have to provide a level of service maximum equal to the level of service that you're getting from a vendor. And so you can't get into bed with a vendor until you know what kind of service they're going to provide to you. I call up their support team. Hey, I have a problem. Can you help me figure this out? I'm still in sales. Sorry, you're pre-sales support. Okay, can you help me? Anyways, just a quick question. It's not even a real issue. You make stuff up. Hey, I was wondering what this feature does. How do you do this XYZ? And how knowledgeable are they? How helpful are they? Are they willing to go outside of their rules and scope of engagement in order to help you out? Right? That's one of the core values we do. We bend over backwards for our clients. It doesn't matter what it is or whether or not it's supported, right? We'll figure that out at the end. We have our contracts already drawn up to account for all those kinds of scenarios. But when they're on the phone and they have a problem, we don't want it. They don't want to hear about billing. They don't want to hear about what's going on. They want that problem fixed. And so solve the problem, and then we deal with whatever else needs to happen on an administrative level, right? And if your vendor is not doing the same thing, then is that really a vendor that you want to align with? So yeah, absolutely. You've got sales, so what you're already dealing with, you've got support. Go ahead and make a ticket. Go ahead and make a fake ticket. Hey, I'm down completely. I can't get access to my tenant. Oh, that's so strange. Are you, what's your customer ID? I'm not really a customer yet. I'm still on trial. Oh, what's your domain that you're using? Okay, that's strange. Well, I'm not really supposed to tell you, but let's take a look. Oh, yeah, hey, it's working, but it looks like you have a typo in your URL. Can you try this instead? Oh, okay, cool, you're good, right? Fabricate an excuse to call them and see how they react, because that's going to be very telling. And then you also have to deal with their billing, right? You got to deal with, so every department that you're going to be interacting with should really be tested to see how well they act. And the other thing is yeah, go ahead.
How would you test billing? I guess you could say that you're trying to pay your invoice and it's not being paid, or you're trying to sign up and it's not. I guess you could easily do that.
Some of the things that you really can't do until you're a customer of theirs, but you want to make sure that you have an out, at least for the first 30 days or
30,
15 days
60,
to
90
cancel,
days.
something like that, that allow you to say, hey, you know what? This doesn't work. You're not delivering what was promised here. And so this isn't going to work out. Again, common sense to have an out on a contract or an agreement of any kind where you're not getting the service that you expect, right? But we're calling it out because it's something that you want to actively test for instead of how many people sign EULAs or agreements and don't even read them, right? And like, oh, well, if you had called in yesterday, you would have been able to cancel. But because you didn't call in yesterday because you didn't care until a problem came up, well then, sorry, you're out of luck.
You didn't write us a handwritten letter in Comic Sans font and then mail it and have it arrive exactly on the 13th of a month that ends in Y.
Yeah, or something like that, because it was in the contract and you didn't read the contract when you signed it. But the bottom line is you want to test for whether and obviously you may not be able to test for every single situation or in every single thing, but you can also read between the lines to see what's going on.
Yeah, there are things you can do. Like let's say, because obviously we're in this situation because we weren't immediately forward thinking with our Excel spreadsheet, right? We were just, I'm in a business now. I now have an Excel spreadsheet, but now's the time to where I can be forward thinking. You can look at a vendor's roadmaps. You can look at a vendor's feature output to see if they're advancing. You can see if they're, some of the stuff isn't maybe on your list. That's on your list now. That may not be business critical, like critical to what you need to do, but it's on their roadmap for a month or 2 months. You can see if what that feature looks like. Like there are situations you can do for any vendor that allow you to help at least plan forward thinking as well.
Their roadmap is another good thing to look at, by the way. How quickly are they turning around feature requests? Are they paying attention to their customer needs? Right. So like, hey, can I see a roadmap and see a list of your feature request board? I just want to see like how many of them have been upvoted and actually been turned around. How quickly are you turning those features around? How active are you on your own board? Right.
Enhancements, feature requests, idea portal.
Exactly. Yep.
Whatever they call it.
These are all things that can help tell you who that company is and how they behave. And so at that point, I think we're basically saying, you know what? We found our product. We found our vendor. We're in love. Where do we go from here? Right? Am I missing anything?
I mean, I've got this down because I think it's properly important to do, not just in this, but in most aspects of business, but budgeting and resource allocation for your plan that you're developing. Since it's a plan, you should budget hours, people, and allocate resources when needed during that plan so that your timeline fits whatever works for the business. If it's a day cutover or if it's a month cutover, you have a plan and you have budgeted and allocated resources.
Yeah, but do you do that before you pick a vendor and software, or do you do that after you pick a vendor and software?
After you pick a vendor and software.
Right. So that's part of the same thing, right? So we've now found our true love for right now, at least. Mm-hmm. How do we move forward? And this is when the actual plan for migration comes into play. Right. This is when we start talking about, okay, well, how much time is it going to take to migrate? And what is the work that's going to be involved for real? Now that we know which vendor, which software we're going to, how much of this stuff is going to be done by the vendor, if any? Are we going to get vendor consulting hours for this? And so these are the questions you start asking to build the plan. If we skip that for the moment and just talk about bare bones planning, right? The basic plan of a migration is literally the same exact plan that you would do for your clients doing a migration of anything else, whether it's from workstation to workstation, server to server, platform to platform. The same bare bones plan that you're going to be following is going to exist, right? Identify what you need, start setting up the things that you can in advance, schedule a cutover date, have training in place, do the cutover.
So, yes, this is the section that I would call implementation.
Right. But the point is like everything else that we want to do will fit in around the implementation, right? So the implementation is now our success framework.
Yep.
How do we get to that? And so from there, we say, okay, well, we need to build out all of our clients into the accounting package, right? So we have a list, sheet 1 on the spreadsheet is a list of all of our clients. We want to build that into the accounting package. How do we get our clients into the accounting package? We also need to get all of our products, sheet 2, into the accounting package. We also need to get all of our pricing, combination of sheet 2 and sheet 3. Like all these things you have to now migrate in. And the only thing that you can't migrate in potentially are current month's financials, invoicing, and stuff like that. Potentially you can't get that
Formulas.
in. But everything else, up until a certain point, you can.
Mhm.
And so this becomes part of the implementation plan. And this is how you start calculating how much labor it's going to take, right? You ever ask someone, like, I don't know, I like the house cleaning analogy. You walk into a house, 15 rooms, everything's a mess, like completely messy, and you have to clean it up. Someone
Aside
says,
from the
how long is
15th
it going to
part,
take?
you've been in my house?
No.
Okay.
I haven't been to your house yet, but I'm supposed to be whenever I visit South Carolina.
Yeah, you'll never come to South Carolina.
It was in the works for a little bit. I'll have to swing by, visit MSP Geek headquarters.
Yeah. Ask how long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost to clean the rooms?
Or how long, like even just labor, right? We're just talking about labor right now. How long is it going to take to clean the house? You can't necessarily estimate it unless you've already done it, right? Which is the biggest problem with budgeting projects, is we don't know until we've done it. And so the phrase, you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right?
Mhm.
It's the same concept. Okay, don't tell me about cleaning the house. How long will it take to clean one room?
This room specifically, the living room.
The
How
living
long
room
will it
that we're
take to
in, or the
clean
room
the
that you're
living room?
in.
Yeah.
And you come up with the time period. And it's
2
going to be an
hours.
estimate. You look at it and like, well, I can see it's about this messy. I can see it's about that much stuff. We got to do X, Y, Z. Okay, cool, right? And so you're looking at your accounting package and you say, well, how long is it going to take for you to migrate the clients? How long is it going to take for you to migrate your products? And you break it down into pieces. It's a lot easier to estimate project tasks than it is to estimate an entire project length.
Mhm.
Just like it's easier to estimate number of the time per room than it is to estimate the entire house.
You know what the benefit of the one each task, right? You go through the tasks that you have to do and you put an estimate on them. At the end, you can add it all up, and now you have a time of how long it's going to take to migrate it.
Not only that, but you now have an implementation plan. You have a scope of work that you have to do, right? So you've accomplished 2 things. You've created a checklist of things to do, and now you have estimated time per checklist, and you also have a total time per project estimated. And then you can start fitting them into timelines throughout. So like it's impossible to come in. So imagine you were moving PSAs, right? You got to move your entire MSP from one PSA to the next. Okay.
No.
That's the first reaction we get. No, you should have seen Kyle's face when I told him we're leaving ConnectWise for a little PSA at a telecom.
But it wasn't that. It wasn't that.
I also told him we would do it in 3 months.
That's
a different story.
That is what made the face happen, was that we're going to do this in 3 months. To be clear, we had literally just installed the demo and played around for maybe a week. And that was the decision he made and told me. Like, so it wasn't like we've been planning this for months and we had a nice system and plan in place. It was like, I love it. It's going to fit everything we need. We're doing it in 3 months. We're going to do it by this date. And I was like, what are you on? Because I want some. It didn't happen. Spoiler alert.
The point is that you can't possibly estimate a time to move something like that. We had 13,000 agents at the time. We had 75 employees. We had 350 different clients. The scope of work that we're talking about is insane. Like even if it was just one client, we're talking about tickets. We're talking about the customer
Thousands
agreement.
Tickets,
we're talking about
assets,
the revenue. We're talking about there's so much
SLAs.
Little pieces involved that you can't possibly estimate how long it's going to take. And so what you do is you break it down. And then you start focusing on specific areas. Again, move what you can in advance. And then you start thinking of, you start coming up with the labor for those individual parts. And then the cutover becomes a lot easier, especially if you can cut over departments. And so maybe, for example, you gave the accounting firm example, where if you're an accounting firm and everyone's using spreadsheets, right? And so you want to go to an accounting package instead. Well, okay, how do we move everybody into the accounting package that's currently using spreadsheets?
We start
The
with
answer is
our own accounting.
break it down by segments. So do you have teams of accountants? Are the different teams covering different companies? Or does everyone just use every company? Or does each accountant get their own spreadsheet, right? There is some segmentation that exists. It may not be utilized day-to-day operations, but it is there and it can be found. And
Like in
so
an
you say,
MSP, you have proactive, you have a help desk, you have intake, you have a quick fix team, you have projects team. Those are all people who do services. And we haven't even talked about operations or anything else, right? You have
right,
procurement, like there's a ton of departments inside or teams segment, and those you might segment later. You might have important team A and not as important team B, right?
yeah.
On
So
call.
so we did our migration by segmenting by department. But you can also do it by segmenting customers and segmenting like teams of customers. And you say, you know what, these 10 customers are going to be moved. And then these 10 customers are going to be moved. And so like that is how there's going to be a way to break it down. And that is the way to do a project like this. So estimate the labor based off of tasks that need to be performed, multiply by the number of times it needs to be performed. I always did. Everyone in for a while, solutions at Intellicom came to me and says, "Hey, what do we estimate setting up doing a email migration of 50 mailboxes?" And it's very simple, right? So like our estimates were not flat rate; they were not a fixed fee. It was a estimate labor, and we charge for the labor we actually use, right? We just want to give the customer an idea of what they're going to be spending. So what I did was I said, well, it can potentially take up to 45 minutes to move a mailbox, potentially, of labor specifically. It could also take like 5 minutes because depending on what software we're doing and which mailbox for like two different platforms are going to, it could be we just click a button and it just goes. So it could be anywhere between that time. But even in a situation where it is 5 minutes, we still have the potential of having to work with the user. Let's say we're rolling out MFA, we got to get MFA registered, we got to get on the computer, we got to reset up Outlook profile potentially, right? If something goes wrong. And so there still would be about 45 minutes of working with a user on a mailbox that takes 5 minutes to migrate, right? And so in that situation, unless we knew for a fact that two platforms didn't have a way to do a 5-minute migration, in which case we just extended the time we'd work with per user, but we just picked 45 minutes a user, multiplied by the number of mailboxes being moved, made it a very easy estimate for the customer. Said, hey, how many mailboxes do you want to cut over? 30? Okay, 30 times 45, there's your hour count, or there's your minute count. Divide that by 60, gives you the hours. Oh, you want to move 30, but we only care about 15 being set up again? No problem. Just adjust the numbers for that. Let's say the moves will drop down to 10 minutes per mailbox for the archives. And then the remaining 15 will do 45. So coming up with that quick, smaller number for a specific task and then being able to multiply quickly by the number of entities that you have to do allows you to come up with an estimate for that project.
So let's talk about the working on implementation. We've decided to move. Everything aligns perfectly. We're moving from Excel to Google Docs, online version only.
Yeah, I would just upload your spreadsheets to SharePoint and call it a day.
We're getting rid of Microsoft. We're going to Google. You mean Google Drive? So
this is the new Google.
Yeah, one of the things I think is important to talk about is data preparation. It's something you want to keep in the back of your mind as you're doing this, because it's not always going to be a one-to-one match. Sometimes you'll have an import feature, sometimes you won't. Being able to clean up your data, which is a massively difficult task depending on how long you've been around as a business, is really important when you're migrating your systems. And it's something you should absolutely try to do if possible. Carve out some time to clean up your data. If you need to transform it from one system to another, you can, but making sure your data is accurate and removing old systems, old data that no longer present will help you tremendously when you evaluate your success criteria and will cause your efficiency to greatly increase.
Yeah, so this is a good argumentative point. You're not wrong in terms of it being best practices, and in terms of everyone saying that that's what you should be doing, and in terms of it probably being a great idea. But I'm a very practical person, I like to think. And for me, I never found it practical to clean up the data. As you mentioned, it's a lot, right? And we just talked about earlier tech debt. And so what's the goal here? Is the goal to clean up your system, or is the goal to get off the software before something bad happens? And the amount of effort you put in to cleaning up the system, which may or may not be required for you to do the move, is essentially generating tech debt. Even if it's just temporary, even if it works out, and in the end you're like, oh, hey, actually, this is really good, and then it's no longer tech debt, you're actually farther ahead. That's good, but it's definitely a gamble. And as you mentioned, the longer you're around, the more data you're likely to have. So that means that the amount of time it takes to clean up, if your data is not already well organized, is going to be a lot longer, which means it's going to add an unquantifiable amount of time to the potential labor that you have to do. Now, with that being said, 100%, if you can clean up your data, cleaning up your data will give you a much better experience during the move. It makes it more reliable, it makes it more stable, it makes it more likely to succeed, it makes it go faster because there's less to move. And so there are untold benefits from being able to do that. But from a practicality standpoint, it may not be possible, or it may be possible, but it may not be feasible.
Yeah, there's always asterisks on any of it. Like, because going back to one of the scenarios you discussed was, but your license will run out for your package. Your contract is up at the end of this month. Instead of like, 'cause realistically, your applications are probably web-based and they're not going to just die tomorrow. But your contract could run out tomorrow, and now you no longer have access to your data. So that is a real possibility. And at some point you may not have time to clean up your data and you just have to import it. But if you have the ability to end the plan for this, I think it should be something that's at least discussed internally. Because it, as you stated, it will be, if done and accomplished and feasible. You can even do it, in bite-sized chunks, and like going to the PSA, we can clean up our companies, or we can clean up our contacts, or in RMM, we can clean up our agents. Like, you can take it in bite-sized chunks. So you don't have to clean up the entire system, which you can prioritize what sections you want to clean up in whatever application you're working with, as well. Even though you may not get all of it, you can get some of it. And I do think you should try to fit some time to do that in, if feasible.
Yeah, so I take the middle ground. Anyone who's done like the classic, if you're a classic technician from back in the day and you're doing exchange to exchange server mailbox migration, right? One of the steps Microsoft always had in the mailbox is, oh, you got to get that mailbox below 4 gigs, or ideally below 6, 4 ideally, but 6 is minimum, or something like that, right? There was a limit that you had to clean up all your deleted items. You had like a whole checklist of things that the user should be doing to prepare for the mailbox being migrated in order to guarantee success, or make it more likely that the mailbox would migrate. And it's the same thing. Like, you can't even get the users to clean up, to even respond to an email, let alone clean up anything in their mailbox, right? They're going to get flooded with emails every single day saying your mailbox size is too big every day, and they're just going to forward that to support, like, hey, what is this message? Hey, what's this message? Oh, you got to clean up your, I don't want to do that, right? Or the ones who call and be like, hey, I've been storing all of my important documents, deleted items, and now they're all gone, right? Nobody's going to want to clean that stuff up. And the point is like, going back to that feasibility thing, the question is, how much is that going to impact the migration, right? And this is what I really love about the platforms that give you trials, because you basically have a throwaway environment, which means migrate the data and see what happens. You want to know how long it's going to take and you have no idea? Do a migration in trial and see what happens. How much of that data made it? How much of that data didn't make it? What does the data look like? How much of a pain was it to migrate based off of the size of data that you have? And based off of those answers, you can walk away going, oh, okay, we really need to clean this up. Oh, it worked. We don't need to clean anything up. I mean, we do need to clean up
The
in general,
timeline
so
was
we'll do that
reasonable.
afterwards. But exactly, the amount of time it took to migrate that amount of data may make it not worth spending on cleaning up right now. There's always a situation to consider, and I personally prefer to take the middle ground where I just try it. If it works, unless my project is to clean up, I am not doing it at the time of doing the migration.
To each their own.
To each their own. Like I said, it's an argumentative point.
So after, let's say we're in our trial, we've migrated our data. Obviously, we need to implement what we need to implement, right? We need to start building out and customizations and configuration of the new system to both understand how it works and to start building out how we expect it to work in our current business processes. Like taking Excel, like if we're running a P&L sheet, we have the data. How does getting the data from the client sending me receipts work in the new system? How does that workflow process as I build it out?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we need to do after having picked the product that works for the company, is we need to get buy-in. Everyone in the organization needs to be on board with the migration. They have to understand that it's coming. They have to see the value. If you have someone, even a low-level person, low-level worker, employee, that's not interested in the platform, what's going to happen is they're going to spread negativity in response to the platform. They're going to be sarcastic comments, snarky comments. Some may be funny, some may not be funny, and it's going to spread. People around them, the people they talk to, it's going to become a joke, and then it ruins the process of the move, because people now are going into it with this expectation of it being either a joke or not good enough or something like that. And so part of this thing that you have to do is, like, as building in the processes to the platform, to understand, like, we have this process about entering the receipts into the Excel spreadsheet line by line. How does that work with the accounting package? Oh, we just email it in. Cool. Let's make sure everybody knows that process. Let's make sure people have tried it. Like, if you have loudmouths at your company that are always, like, who they are, the complainers, right? Get them on board first. That's the trick.
Just spread the good word as well as the bad one.
People to work with are the ones you want to do first, because they'll be the ones, if you can convince them, the rest will be easy. And so get them to learn the process, try to figure out, like, what are ways we can make this easier instead of harder. Is the email address 35 characters long that they're going to have to remember every single time they type in, right? Maybe make an alias and have it just go there instead, or do like an external forwarding contact in your system so that it just forwards out to the correct email address. The point is, you got to get buy-in from the organization. People have to want to have the change occur. Otherwise, it's not going to go as well as it could.
So what would you say to recommending that those people who helped build this plan? Like, because obviously we've made the decision to move, it fits all of our guidelines. Now we have to put those guidelines in action, right? We have to create them if they don't already exist inside the system. If there's no way to put in receipts, right? But there's a way to create how we put in receipts, right? There's no default method to do that, and has to be created. All that has to be built and tested prior to getting that buy-in, right?
Yeah. I was talking to a customer once, and they were running FileMaker. And they had, like, this guy custom developed inside of FileMaker scripts and tables and automations and tied into external databases and who knows what. And they were running FileMaker like 11 or 12 or something like that. It was a ridiculously old version. And we were pushing them for a while to get to at least, if not off of FileMaker, to the latest version of FileMaker, which at the time was like 21 or something like that, 22. And I was talking to him, and the conversation was constantly like, okay, but how do I know when we're ready? Like, is everything going to work? Like, how do we test this, right? Here's the hard truth, is that there is no such thing. Let me restart that. there's nothing better than live testing, right? You will never test what you need in a development environment. It's never going to happen. You cannot account for every situation that you're going to run into. You can't account for everything that you need to do unless you spend more time than it's going to be financially feasible for you to do the migration. It's just not worth it. It's better financially to cut operations for a day and do a cutover for fake to see what happens in a single day operations, and then redo those operations in the real system if you have to roll back, than it is for you to try to plan for every situation that's going to happen. Obviously, there's asterisks all over that, but
100%.
most of the time, that's going to be the case, right? There are situations where you can't do that, and you have to come up with every possible scenario that you can. But understand that even if you do, and you cut over, you're still going to run into problems, right? So the best and fastest way to test is to literally just cut over and see what happens. If we can pull that off, then that's what you do. Barring that, doing a soft cutover or a segmented cutover and allowing, okay, you know what? We're at a group of accountants and an accounting firm using spreadsheets, but we've only gotten 10 clients in this pod right now, as opposed to every other pod's got 50 clients, because we've been reorganizing, and it's just the way things are currently. They're the smallest pod. Cut them over first. And if things go to hell, you're only dealing with 10 clients that have problems instead of 50, right?
Or 130.
Or 130 if you cut, depending on how many you're cutting over or whatever. But finding a way to minimize the amount of impact it's going to cause, but still performing a live cutover allows you to lower the risk, right? This is one of the topics we were talking about at MSP GeekCon, is defensive mindset. Not just planning and migration or cutovers, it's also in troubleshooting. Like if you're about to do an action and you're not sure what the outcome is going to be, try to predict what's going to happen and come up with mitigations to prevent that, as well as mitigations to minimize that impact that's going to happen. Common example of that is, two examples. Common one is, hey, I need to delete this registry key in order for this program to start working again. What happens if it doesn't work, and what happens if that key is really necessary? So you export it first, right? That's your mitigation to recover from that happening, right? And you start thinking about, okay, I'm going to delete this key. What's going to go wrong? Well, I might need it again. You don't need to come up with every scenario. The bottom line is you might need it again. Okay, well then you export that key and save it. And then if you need it again, you still have it, right? So that's one way to do it. That's the other way. The other example we talk about is, oh, I need to perform an operation against a large number of users or a large number of entities, right? So I've got 300 users in Active Directory. I need to update all their titles across the board in a script. Well, you have a script that you hope that you did correctly and will work properly. If it doesn't work, you're going to spend a lot of time fixing 300 users. What if instead you change the script to focus on one user?
Select top 5.
Top 1.
Top
sure,
1.
You can go do it individually, manually for that one and say, like, yeah, it's working, great. But that doesn't tell you the script works, right? You're looking to test the script in this case. And so you'd run the script focused on a single entity. And then worst case scenario, all you have to do is roll it back for one person instead of 300. It's the same exact concept that applies during the migration and cutover of a large scale platform, right? Test what you can, build what you can in testing. In order to how you build that out, go to the people on the ground, the people who use the software every single day, and say, hey, what are the operations that you perform? What is it that you need done, right? The worst thing that we get back as a vendor, you'll find this out often. As a content creator, you get this back. You'll figure this out really quickly as well. But as someone doing project work internally, it doesn't, when you're dealing with a client, it happens less often. When you're dealing internally, it happens just as often. The most common problem we run into is lack of feedback. Hey, we just wrote this great 6-page article. No one's telling you how much they like it or discussing the points. Yeah, it looks great, right? You just wrote this policy for your company internally that everyone has to now start following, and you're looking for feedback on whether or not the policy is actually good or covering everything or whatever. Good luck getting feedback on that policy. It's not going to happen. You're cutting over a software like we're talking about, and you need to make sure that you have the software working correctly, right? Good luck getting feedback from every single department telling you, hey, you have met our requirements in this platform. It's going to take a lot of chasing. But that is really what the goal is, to get the feedback from the people who use the software every single day that you're replacing, so they can tell you how they use it and what you need to do. You're like, some of the things they'll tell you, like, really, you do that? That's ridiculous. Which is fine. You don't have to recreate it. You just have to give them a way to accomplish what they're trying to do with that crazy process. Similar to what we did when we said, like, a feature may not exist in the platform, but we can replace it with something else. It's the same exact idea. So that's what we want to get to when we start building out what that platform looks like, and the various capabilities and custom fields and things like that we do inside of that platform.
So you just covered a topic that I have called user acceptance testing, which is basically getting the user who's going to be using the platform and is using the old platform into using the new one, and identifying the issues that are occurring so that you can adjust where needed to, and you could get their buy-in and input. Once that's complete, you have what feels like a valid time to migrate, right? Your timeline's working, your product's built, you've done user testing, things work as you expect them in your testing environment. And it is now time to plan your cutover day. What do you do to lead up to, obviously you pick a day, but what do you do in preparation of that cutover day?
If we go back to the FileMaker example, where I was talking to the client about the cutover for FileMaker, I told him to do live testing, right? So basically, I don't know if you're familiar with FileMaker or not. In general, FileMaker is essentially like QuickBooks. There's a series of database files that exists. And so you open up the database, and then all your stuff is inside of it. And so to migrate versions, technically speaking, all you're doing is you're essentially upgrading the database version from one to the next, right? It's just a file that changes are being happened to, and then that's it. So I told him, I was like, listen, you've built out and upgraded your scripts to remove all the deprecated functions from the previous version and the new version. And you've confirmed it all works, right? And you have the ability, you have those scripts exported. And so we could technically copy your 12 file into 21, like make a new copy of the file with all your current data, log in, import your script changes, and by the next morning, it could be ready to use. And this is our live testing. So now what we do is we said, hey, users, tomorrow morning, you're going to be opening up FileMaker 21 instead of FileMaker 12. And you're going to start doing your work. And instead of doing your work like normal, we want you to just spend the first hour and try every single thing that you can that you generally have to do throughout a month period or a year period. And if you run into a problem, let us know. And the goal is, if you run into a problem in the first 5 minutes, if it's not something that can be fixed just as quickly, we stop what you're doing, go back to the old file, and we save the day. If you run into a problem within the first hour, then again, same evaluation. We roll back, we repeat the last hour's worth of work, and we basically go the whole day. The same cycle repeats basically the entire day. If you've gone an entire day and you haven't run into a problem,
that's a show-stopping problem.
Right. Then we just cut over. Like then we are cut over. There's nothing to cut over. You're done. Right? You're in the new version. Everyone's working. You have an entire day's worth of work. Nobody ran into a show-stopping critical problem. You have to move anyways. It's not like you can roll back and decide, we'll just do that later, right? So if you're able to complete an entire day's worth of work inside the platform, that means tomorrow you should be able to do the same thing. And tomorrow the same thing. You may not be able to do an entire month without running into an issue, but at least you can take that one day of stalled operations within that month period and fix what went wrong, right? And so depending on the platform, like to answer your question, depending on the platform, the plan to cut would be different. Yeah. It may be something like that, where you can say, hey, during testing, we've realized that we're all good. Like we've planned it out perfectly. Let's cut. And then there's no scheduling. You're already done. And then it could be a situation where you haven't completed all the work that needs to happen, but you've done testing in a certain area. And so maybe
segmented cut is viable.
And now you're exactly. Now you can cut segmented and say, you know what? You are live on this platform from now on, and all your work is happening here. And then the next thing, we have to focus on the next group of either department or next group of clients or next team or whatever it is that we're going to be doing in that segmentation. Alternatively, it could be like, hey, we tested this thing, but we really can't cut you over live until we also move this other thing, which we found out. So let's fall back for the day. You're going to go back to the old system, and we'll build out this thing, and we'll try again a dry cut
some other time.
Another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
All right. Come up with a plan to fix whatever's missing, and then try again.
So some key things that I think we should probably discuss in the cutover points, right? No plan survives contact with the enemy, right? That is a key mantra that you should be repeating.
We're at war, guys, remember?
Yeah. So I've been a part of several migrations in my IT career. And the ones that have gone the best, or, that I'd consider positive migrations, not they didn't perfectly go well, right? That's a dream. But those I've set expectations with. I'm like, look, this is going to be rough. It's not going to be super easy. I'm going to be here to help you. We're going to work towards this together, but expect delays, issues, bugs, and problems until we identify them in live testing, right? You're going back to the very beginning, setting expectations with those users who are moving over is critical to this, including your clients. Setting expectations that, hey, look, I'm sorry that we're going to be slower than normal today, but we're cutting over our accounting package. It's going to make things much easier in the long term, but today is going to suck. Being open and honest and clear with everyone involved consistently. Don't come in one day and be like, oh, it's going to be fine, no problems. We'll be smooth as silk. And then the next day cut over and it's a horrible mess. Like, you don't want to, it's always the same message. Be prepared for issues. We're going to be here to help you solve them. And cut over. Set up a system that allows you to communicate effectively with those who have problems and record those issues down. When we migrated our PSA system, Mandy and I sat on a phone call all day. We were on the same call all day, and we were just like, people were popping in with issues they were reporting and through Teams chats, but we were on the call all day, typing in an Excel spreadsheet the problems that we were facing that were reported to us, their severity, and if it was fixed or not. And that was a cutover day. It was we sat down with our critical piece of our segmented cutover, our help desk.
It
was
the day after DattoCon. We literally walked back in from DattoCon and we're like, let's do it. And we cut. And we had a morning call with everyone, the help desk. And we're like, hey guys, today is going to be the worst day of your lives at Telecom.
We're sorry.
Yeah, we're not really sorry, but we feel you. No, I don't. Yeah, I mean, and like, so one of the things that I always like to do, I say that again, I'm saying it again now, something else, is that you'll find life is made up of a lot of iterations of the same exact thing or the same concept or same whatever. And therefore, like, we can always draw analogies from something. I did a Rising Tide challenge on LinkedIn a while back where I would pull a situation from everyday life and draw out like three situations and draw out 3 things to learn, like life lessons that you can learn out of everyday situations. I almost went viral, guys. It was kind of cool. For a day. In this case, for a day. It was like a week.
It migrated though. It morphed.
It morphed, yeah. In this case, the analogy I'm going to talk about is, a foundation. Number one, the foundation is the most important part of anything that you build, right? Because you don't know if it's strong enough until it starts holding a load and then it starts to crack. And if your foundation is shoddy, then the structure you build on it's going to be shoddy as well, right?
If it survives.
Doesn't matter if it even survives, right? So what we're talking about here by setting expectations, right? It's the same concept with expectations we set with our clients, expectations our vendors set with us. We need to be setting internally with our own team members and our own employees. That's how they get a good experience working for us and working with us. Otherwise, they don't have it. And if you come in and you pretend everything's going to be okay, you know what that does? You're laying a foundation of distrust and dishonesty. And you're laying a foundation of, yeah, everything's going to be great. The very first time something goes wrong, you shatter their trust in you. It's gone because you've told them everything's going to be great. And now it's not. And now they no longer believe you. And you know what you do? Oh, well, I fixed it. Now everything's going to be great. You know what's going to happen when it breaks again? You shatter it again. And the more times it shatters, the more pieces it breaks into, the harder it's. Exactly. And so coming up with that foundation of, I understand the scope and scale of what we're doing. It's going to be hard. These are the ways that we're accounting for it. Right? And so it may or may not go well, but we're here for you. And when it doesn't go well, we want to make sure that we can solve it as quickly as possible. This is the plan we've implemented in order to make sure that we can respond in a timely fashion to those issues. We're going to triage those problems. We're going to mark them critical and non-critical. We'll either fix them on the spot, or we'll mark them to be fixed by the end of the week or some other time period. We'll let you know. And now you're building a foundation where they understand what they're getting into. And so that first time something goes wrong, you know what's going to happen? Well, he told me it's going to go wrong. I guess he was right. And you start cementing this understanding layer of trust and faith, because now he's like, yeah, he was entitled. Like he said, and you know what happens? That time when you triage something critical and you said you turn it around immediately, you turn it around immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And then that
you start
they're
delivering
elevated
on the
in their abilities. And
exactly.
you when as an individual, if you say everything's going to break, but I'm going to be here to support you, let me know what happens. They're in it. They're active. Something breaks. They immediately message you and you immediately work with them, identify the problem and solve it. You've just elevated yourself in their eyes from a leadership, management, trust perspective. And those in any industry, any working environment, that is absolutely critical to maintaining the war effort. At
it's
an
just
MSP.
A healthy relationship. You don't have to get all fancy and technical. It's literally just a healthy relationship, right? If you deliver on the promises, even in a personal relationship, you deliver on the promises that you make, that makes you trustworthy. That makes you the person. They don't care what product it is as long as you're there with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it comes down to. So absolutely don't pretend everything's going to be fine, because you know it's not going to be.
So we've cut over. It all went to hell in a handbasket. Things are on fire, but we managed to put them out.
Throw it all away.
We're on day 2 of a new system. A lot of the fires have been squelched, and we're progressing. Post migration optimization. Let's talk about that.
I wouldn't touch it for at least a month.
Well, I mean, I'm not giving an exact timeline. Like I did actually give an exact timeline.
You did.
The next
2 days later.
Let's talk about the next thing that happens after everything.
What you care about is fixing problems from migration, right?
Yes.
We're not looking at feature enhancement. We're not looking at optimization. We're looking at fixing problems that exist from migration. So once we get past all of that, and then we want to start talking about optimization. So before that, we actually, like, oftentimes people will say, hey, I need to move from product A to product B, but my business is operating just fine on product A, even though it's not going to or may not continue that way or whatever. Right now, it's operating just fine on product A. So in order to make product B worth it, I want to also add in these 25 enhancements or optimizations once we get onto that platform. And they turn it into one big project. And they go, hey, you know what? We're moving PSAs, and we also want to automate all of our user onboardings, offboardings, client onboardings, and
at the same time,
password resets and shared mailboxes, and it all has to be done immediately, because that's
here's like 8 new processes.
That'll make it worth it.
Yeah,
that'll make it worth it.
No, please don't do that. That is a horrible idea.
The project is a journey, like everything else in life, and so a step in that journey is to get to a point where you can start to automate, so to speak, or you can start to optimize. Let's move away from the specific examples again, start talking about generics, because the point is any platform. their optimizations need to happen. That is a phase 2, phase 3 thing, right? And so we have to get onto the platform first, even if we're not getting anything net new, right? If you can cut, trust me, guys, I've done thousands of platform migrations over the years. If you can cut over a platform from A to B of 2 disparate softwares, different vendors completely, and walk away with your business operating at the same exact level, you have gained. It may not feel like it, but you have gained, right? So ideally you're doing that and you immediately see that gain. But even if you don't, even if you have the exact same operational efficiency and you're on the newer software or the more fully featured software, whatever it is, you're no longer on the Excel spreadsheets and you're in an accounting package, and your processes and your amount of time it takes to turn things around have not increased at all, right? It may not have decreased, but it hasn't increased, then you have gained, because you're now one step further without any negative impact onto that migration. You no longer have that tech debt. You're now on a modern platform, so to speak, hopefully. You're on a vendor that you like and trust and services you the way you service your clients, and all those things that you've accomplished. And now you're better prepared to then enter the stage of how do we make it more efficient now that we've done the cutover, right? And so from a business perspective, a financial perspective, it's like, well, I'm paying the same amount of money. I'm doing the same amount of work at the end. And so what's the point of moving? Because the financials are looking at the financials right now, and they don't care about future. They may care about future if you can provide a projected time frame and what that financials will look like in the future, the projected financials in a certain time frame. But most often you can't, because you don't even know what's possible and what you can do until you even get to that point, depending on the size and scope of the project. But if you can move platforms and not suffer a decrease in productivity by the time you're done, then you've actually moved forward, even if it doesn't feel like it. And then the next thing that you do is, now let's see what optimizations exist. And this, we start talking about data-driven decisions, right? This is the fun stuff. I don't think it's fun. This is the fun stuff for Kyle.
Yeah.
We don't have time. I gotta run soon. But the point is like, where we want to focus our efforts is driven by data. Bottom line. You want to look at metrics that tells you where your
bottlenecks are,
where you're least efficient. There you go. Yeah. That's the word. I was going to say most inefficient. Where
you're
least efficient.
Both of those work.
Pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Start focusing on it.
Understand it. Highlight where the inefficiencies are in that process. If we go back to user onboardings, automating those, sure, that's an amazing thing. You get a new client, fills out a form, everything's done. You do nothing. That is a doable situation with the software and
charge for an onboarding.
Yeah, that is a doable situation, and all of anything you can imagine. There are multiple applications that exist in the MSP space now that will allow you to do that. They can fill out a form, and their user counts created, their build increased, and all of that good stuff happens by them filling out the form and you only being tangentially aware of it. But that stuff has its own things that need to be built in, and own systems that need to be added and adjusted inside of your newly acquired software package. You can't just do it all at once. But that brings up another good point that I think we should highlight is, in building out timelines, they have to be realistic. You cannot build out a timeline to cut over your 50-person accounting company tomorrow, and
or 75-person PSA in 3 months.
So I don't even think it was 3 months. I think it was like a month and a half.
No, it was 3 months. Okay. It was January, and I gave it by March. The story behind that was obviously like, give realistic expectations, sure, but also know your audience. And so, depending on the situation, it's not necessarily bad. Like, I don't know, it's going to be based off perception at the time. So I can tell you from some people's perspectives, it was definitely bad, but from others, it wasn't. Like mine, for example, it was not bad. It's not bad to give an accelerated time period so that it gets taken seriously. Like we all live in the MSP life, and MSP world. If it's not happening tomorrow, it's not important. I'm not thinking about it. And in reality, it's the same with businesses in general. Like remember, I said MSPs are just like businesses. They just run 10x or whatever times the speed, the number of clients that you have, right? As a normal business. So the same exact concept happens. Oh, a contract's up for renewal in a year. I'm not worrying about it until 6 months. Okay, but the contract is for a platform. It's going to take you a year to move. And so you're not thinking about it until 6 months, which means you got 6 months plus 6 months after you re-sign to move. Or you try doing a half-assed migration that you can't complete before the contract's up for renewal. And now everything's horrible, right? So that planning has to happen. The accelerated time period that you give, right? This falls back to the idea of when you're setting expectations, right? Under promise, over deliver. Mm-hmm. In this case, it was reversed because we have to get people to start moving quickly. So we have to over promise and then under deliver.
Over promise and over deliver is what you want to do in this situation.
Well, it's not, it doesn't exactly tie in the right way, but the point is to tell someone it's happening sooner so they start paying attention to it, plan for it happening later so that you don't actually fall behind on your timeline. So your plan that you're doing is that it has a timeline that has to be realistic. What you tell people, doesn't have to be as realistic or as aligned with your plan as long as it's not later.
Sooner.
No, Later's... the idea is to do it sooner.
Well, if you say you're doing it in 3 months, but you have to push it back a month because you found something, people will feel more comfortable with that. That's was what I was getting at. So pushing it back is okay.
I'm saying
going from 3 months to 2 months. Yeah, going from 3 months to 2 months does not. Don't do that. You'll panic everyone.
Oh yeah, so that's the other side of it that I wasn't even talking about. But yeah, if you're telling people it's 3 months and then you decide to do it in 2 months, like don't do that. If you told people it's happening at a time period, you can do it later, but don't do it earlier.
And always constantly communicate.
Over communicate.
Yep. If you're moving in 3 months, start communicating once every other week to let people know what's happening, where you're at, get prepared. Host training classes, constantly be in their faces with this is happening and at this point in time, and be upfront, open, and make sure that they are aware they're moving accounting packages.
There was one other thing I want to talk about when we were talking about data-driven stuff that I forgot about.
I mean, we've been going for 92 minutes, so
I know we got to stop. What was that one thing? I don't remember. Oh well. We'll
do a data-driven decision-making talk.
I have a PowerPoint think it was slide. Tangentially related. I don't think it was actually related.
Everything's tangentially related, Mindy.
I know, that's the point. Everything's related to everything. Right? The theory of relativity is it's not just about everything being relative to each other. It's about everything being related to each other.
And on that note, I think that's a perfect time to sign off. Thank you, everyone who is currently watching, who has watched, and who will watch our GeekCast Zoom edition. Any questions, let us know. We're in the Slack and Discords. Come to MSP GeekCon when we announce it. Anything you want to say, Mindy?
No.
Okay.
I'm good.